Hello, my name is Cathy Cowan Becker, and this is a presentation on what a Green New Deal could look like. This is to go over what it could actually look like in practice, and hopefully it will give you a foundation of the Green New Deal, make it a little more concrete, and give you a framework to judge the climate plans of politicians and political candidates and what it might actually look like on the national, state, and local level. So first, what is the Green New Deal? It's not legislation, but it's a resolution, and it was introduced in the House by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and in the Senate by Ed Markey. It's not meant to be a specific program, but rather to be an umbrella that a lot of specific programs could be enacted under. It sets goals. It basically says that the duty of the federal government is to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions, create millions of good-paying, high-paying jobs, invest in infrastructure and industry, and secure clean air and water, climate resiliency, and healthy food, and do all this through a 10-year national mobilization. Now, the Green New Deal so far has 100 co-sponsors in the House and 14 in the Senate, but not many of them are from Ohio. So in fact, only Marcia Fudge up near the Akron and Cleveland area supports the Green New Deal. She's a co-sponsor. So if you're watching this and you live in her district, please contact her and thank her. But neither of our senators, Brown or Portman, support it. None of the other three Democrats, Beatty, Capter, or Ryan, are co-sponsors, and none of the Republicans in Congress are co-sponsors. So if you live in their districts, please contact them and tell them to support and co-sponsor the Green New Deal. So the rest of this presentation will be looking at what the Green New Deal could look like in practice. And first I'll go over 5 areas where there could be programs and policies enacted under the Green New Deal, and look at some examples on the state and local level. And then I'll finish by looking at a little bit about what is being done in cities and especially in Ohio. So one area that the Green New Deal could have a number of programs is in infrastructure. So we could have policies and programs to repair, upgrade, and expand railways, bridges, our energy grid, water lines, and not just repair what's broken, but also build new systems that cut carbon pollution, ensure clean air and water, and reduce climate impacts on frontline communities, and in the process create millions of good-paying jobs. So one area of infrastructure is water. So the Green New Deal could be used to replace lead pipes for millions of people with lead-contaminated water. So we all know of Flint, Michigan, but there's 3,000 other communities in the United States that have water lead levels as bad or worse than Flint. The Green New Deal could also be used to build out green infrastructure to reduce flooding by use of natural spaces to handle stormwater. So an example on the local level was in Pittsburgh, where a group called Pittsburgh United launched the Clean Rivers campaign. So this was a coalition of unions, community groups, and environmental organizations. They pushed for green infrastructure projects to reduce flooding, and they got a number of public investments in creating green spaces to absorb rainwater, replacing lead pipes, and improving roads. Another area of infrastructure is transportation. So between cities, we could build out a nationwide network of high-speed rail and regional rail systems. This would provide an affordable way to get between cities quickly and safely, and it could also cut the need for air travel in short and medium distance trips. And then within cities, we could be expanding light rail and bus rapid transit, which is sort of like making buses as rail-like as possible, light rail on wheels. This would support clean air, cut carbon pollution, and save money. So an example in Ohio is Cleveland's Health Line. This is considered one of the best examples of bus rapid transit in the country. They serve 5 million customers per year. The buses come every 5 to 7 minutes. They get their own lane for most of the route. They get traffic signal preference. So fares are prepaid like you think of for a subway. There's covered stations with seats and message boards and an elevated platform for same level boarding, which helps speed things up. So another area of infrastructure is the energy grid, and a Green New Deal could be used to develop a smart grid that would cut electricity costs, boost reliability, and support the growth of clean energy. And we could hire and train workers to construct and upgrade energy transmission lines, connect sources of wind and solar power to the grid, and also expand battery storage. So a state and local example, actually a local example in Ohio is community choice aggregation, which has been done in Cincinnati, and Columbus is actually looking at it too. So community choice aggregation is a program legal in 8 states, of which Ohio is one. It allows cities, townships, or counties to pool all of their utility customers and use that to leverage the best prices for energy from utilities. A city can aggregate for any kind of energy, but we are pushing to aggregate for 100% renewable, which Cincinnati did some time ago. And so far, they've been doing that by buying renewable energy certificates, which are essentially carbon offsets. But recently, they committed to buy 100 megawatts of direct solar energy from a solar farm being built in Highland County. And in fact, it was Cincinnati's commitment to buy this energy that got the banks to finance building the solar farm. So we're hoping to do the same thing in Columbus. Columbus is putting community choice aggregation on the ballot in November. Worthington passed a similar program for 100% renewable energy last year. It passed by 75%. And so some other cities in central Ohio are also considering this. So a second program or area under the Green New Deal where we could have policies and programs concerns buildings. And so this is all about energy efficiency, saving energy, retrofitting homes, businesses, and government buildings. Doing this nationwide would create hundreds of thousands of good paying jobs in construction, installation, and manufacturing. It would save billions of dollars for families and businesses and also move us closer to climate stability. And we could achieve these goals with nationwide energy efficiency standards for buildings and appliances and public investments to fund energy efficiency programs. So on a local level, last year New York City passed the Climate Mobilization Act, and that's all about its buildings. As you know, New York City has a lot of buildings. They have 50,000 buildings that are larger than 25,000 square feet. And so those buildings will have to reduce emissions 40% in the next decade, 80% by 2050. All of these retrofits will create 8,000 jobs per year in construction and maintenance. And the legislation includes terms to prevent rent increases. So a state example of this is the Future Energy Jobs Act in Illinois. So this gives low-income families access to community solar projects, job training for formerly incarcerated people. Their energy efficiency standards will create 7,000 jobs per year, and it will cut $4 billion in energy costs for families. So a third area of the Green New Deal where we could enact programs under the Green New Deal is manufacturing. And so we know manufacturing helped create the US middle class. That's especially true in Ohio. But this has been weakened by corporate-led globalization and unfair trade deals. But the climate crisis is an opportunity to create a new generation of manufacturing jobs that support clean air, clean water, and a stable climate. So an example of a policy that manufacturing could adopt is a buy clean law. So each year the federal government and really any government spends billions of tax dollars to buy goods, things like steel for bridges, insulation for buildings, paper for offices. And a national buy clean law would stimulate clean manufacturing by requiring that tax dollars be spent on goods made under certain conditions that protect our environment, our air, water, and climate, and also protect workers. So in California, the state has a buy clean policy. Their policy requires 800 large industrial facilities to track, report, and reduce carbon emissions, and also requires state agencies to take supplier emissions into account when they decide where to buy things like steel, glass, and insulation. So this is a way of cleaning up, using the government's power, leveraging their purchasing power to clean up the manufacturing chain from top to bottom. So a similar policy is buy local. So a policy like this would encourage local manufacturing of wind turbines, solar panels, and other clean energy components. This could be used to spur job growth in the clean energy sector, but on the local level. And it would require that components be made in local businesses that offer high wages and good working conditions. So a fourth area where we could enact a program under the Green New Deal is a climate conservation corps. So most people know that the original New Deal had a civilian climate conservation corps. So we're looking at a climate conservation corps, and that would employ hundreds of thousands of people to restore essential ecosystems. So one place they could work is our national forests and our state forests. They could expand these forests by planting trees that help sequester carbon and also manage the land to reduce fire risks and shield communities threatened by fires, especially out west. They could also work in wetlands. So we know wetlands filter water, trap pollution, and buffer communities from hurricane storms and floods. But wetlands are disappearing, and in Ohio, 90% of our wetlands have been destroyed or filled in or degraded through draining, filling, and other changes. So restoring these wetlands would help protect our homes and communities from storms and flooding. And a climate conservation corps could also do hazardous waste cleanup. So thousands of communities live near a hazardous waste site or near a former industrial facility, a brownfield, or an abandoned mine. And this disproportionately affects low-income and communities of color. So under a Green New Deal, we could hire and train workers to safely clean up these waste sites and these toxic areas and help ensure clean air and water for all. And finally, a program we could do with the Green New Deal is to incentivize climate-friendly farming. So we know large-scale industrial agriculture contributes to carbon pollution, but climate-friendly farming sequesters carbon by programs like turning manure into compost, planting cover crops, or avoiding tilling. And this boosts economic security by producing more plentiful harvests, and it also helps make our farms more resilient. So throughout the Green New Deal are policies to ensure equity. So things like requiring projects to pay good wages, hire locally, offer training, and sign agreements with unions. To give priority to projects that reduce air and water pollution, help prevent climate disasters, and benefit low-income and communities of color. And also give priority to projects that allow communities to define their own priorities, what needs to be done in their community, because they're the ones who know where are the toxic waste sites, where are the flood zones, get them a voice at the table. So one thing most people don't realize is how much progress has been made on 100% renewable energy and Green New Deal programs. But so far in the United States, 166 cities have made commitments, official commitments to transition to 100% renewable energy. In Ohio, that includes 4 cities, Cleveland and Cincinnati, the small suburbs of Lakewood and South Euclid, and we have active campaigns in several others, but also 13 counties, 8 states, DC, and Puerto Rico. So currently in the United States, 100 million people, or 1 in 3, live in a jurisdiction that is committed to 100% renewable energy. And of those, about 50 are already operating on 100% renewable energy. Many of those are in California, which also has community choice aggregation, and that's the basis of those communities being able to do that. So that's why we're so excited about that program and hope to see that enacted here in Columbus. So what's our pathway to 100% renewable energy? So we have kind of a 5-6 step plan. Energy efficiency, bringing the amount of energy that you use down, that comes first. Promoting renewables, so what energy you do have to use, transferring that to renewables. Dealing with transportation by transitioning to electric vehicles. Cleaning up the energy supply. using their lots of creative financing mechanisms to deal with that age-old question of how do you pay for it, and throughout ensuring equity and transparency. So let's look at energy efficiency. So as we discussed already, buildings are the top carbon emitters in most cities. It was 70% in New York City. It's 58% in Columbus. So energy efficiency retrofits for city buildings, for commercial buildings, and homes can really help lower the amount of energy being used and the amount of carbon being emitted. So we could provide energy audits and upgrades for residential. There we do have an equity issue. A lot of people who are low income, well, they would need help to make some of these upgrades, but also a lot of them rent. And a lot of renters have to pay their own utility bills while the landlords are the ones that would have to make the upgrades. So we need to address this split incentive with programs to either incentivize or maybe a carrot or stick approach for landlords, or even just a transparency ordinance to require them to say what's the usual energy bill in a unit. And if it's really high, residents may look somewhere else to rent. There are also programs called green leases that can be sort of splits between landlords and tenants as a way to make these energy upgrades. So in the renewable energy area, for city buildings and properties such as parks, schools, or just municipal buildings in general, we can build out renewable energy there. For homes and businesses, we could start programs like solar co-ops, which are kind of a bulk purchase program, and we've recently had one in Franklin County where 150 people signed up, and because there are so many, they can negotiate lower prices for the equipment to put solar on their homes. Or an incentive program, which we don't have here yet, but some other cities have done. For utility scale renewable energy, we need programs about buying local to be built in, and we need cities and states to intervene in legislative and regulatory proceedings to make renewable energy, I guess, to boost it and make it more of a go-to. So in transportation, that encompasses a number of things. Obviously, there's electric vehicles, trying to move people into electric vehicles, transitioning city fleets, and that's just regular cars, but as well as larger moving vehicles such as buses. Providing consumer education. So the Smart Columbus Center in downtown Columbus, you can go there and test drive like a bunch of different models of electric vehicles that otherwise you'd have to go to each dealership to test drive. And once people move to electric, they really don't go back. The maintenance is a lot cheaper. There's no gas. But it's just, a lot of people, that's kind of a big leap, and it helps to do that test drive. And also building out charging infrastructure. So the Smart Columbus grant, they put out a little over 800 additional chargers around the city. They were trying to get to 1,000. So they still have a few more to get done. But also under transportation is to increase public transportation, to say make buses free, to increase the number of buses, to enact bus rapid transit or light rail, but just to really strengthen how public transit works in your city. And we do have some work on that to do in Columbus. To ensure safe bike lanes and sidewalks through programs like Complete Streets, so people can bike and walk safely instead of taking the bus or driving. Shared bikes and scooter programs, and then smart growth so that we're not constantly growing out, but that we're growing in the infill of the city on vacant lots or just internally to the city so that there's less of a car culture and more ability to get around with public transit. So the fourth area is the energy supply. And so here I talked about community choice aggregation, which is legal in 8 states. And we're lucky that Ohio is one. California, as I mentioned, is one. 2 more are considering it. It's the basis of Cincinnati's commitment to 100% renewable energy and of the commitment in many cities in California. So, as I mentioned, aggregation allows cities to pool together their customers to leverage lower prices from utilities, but also leverage more renewable energy. It does in Ohio require a ballot initiative because if the city is going to negotiate on your behalf, you have to okay that. But Worthington passed such a ballot initiative last year. It passed by 75%. And Worthington is purchasing some renewable energy certificates. Cincinnati did that for a long time. But we highly prefer a local supply to be built out, which Cincinnati's doing and which Columbus is considering. So Columbus is going to put aggregation for 100% renewable energy on its ballot in November. And the intent is to use that to leverage build out of local solar. So financing mechanisms. So there are just a lot of different ways these projects can be financed. So one very popular way with city officials is called PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy. That's usually used for large commercial buildings, and that's a way to get a loan to do energy efficiency upgrades, renewable energy upgrades, and then pay it back through the property tax. So the interest rates are a lot lower. And also, if the owner sells the building, the loan goes with the building and doesn't stick with the owner. So that's one reason these big building owners like it. And then once that loan is paid off, then you have much lower energy costs. And so that's, saves you money. Um, and so there is a commercial PACE in Columbus, and Columbus is also working on rolling out a residential PACE so that homeowners can do that as well. I mentioned the bulk purchase programs and solar co-ops. Another way to do this is through incentives. So San Francisco has a program called Go Solar SF that provides up to $2,000 for residences to install solar panels, up to $50,000 for businesses or multi-unit facilities like apartments. You could provide just straight up assistance. So Atlanta is working with Georgia Power to have a rounded up program. So when people get their power bills, they can pay $1 or $2 extra. That money goes into a fund, and that fund helps low income people with energy efficiency and renewable energy upgrades. And also green banks that are specifically doing energy efficiency and renewable energy lending is also another way to do this. And throughout, we want to see equity and transparency, equity, affordability, and access for everyone. This cannot be just a program for the wealthy or the privatized people. This has to be for low-income residents, for communities of color. The energy needs to be clean and renewable. So solar, wind, geothermal, some cases of hydropower. We do not consider compressed natural gas or CNG. That's mostly from fracking. That is not clean or renewable. With Sierra Club, we do not consider nuclear to be clean or renewable. That requires continuous mining of uranium, and the waste is highly toxic and radioactive and has to be stored for literally millions of years. And that's very difficult. It's also very expensive. Solar panels and wind turbines are much cheaper, much more scalable, much quicker. It's really the future. And we also want to see a transparent and inclusive process. So stakeholder meetings with public documents and lots of input and dialogue with the public. That's key to having a fair and equitable process. So in Columbus, as I mentioned, we're putting aggregation for 100% renewable energy on the ballot in November, and that is aiming for renewable energy 100% by 2022. So that's really fast. That may be done with renewable energy certificates at first, but as I mentioned, the intent is to build out local solar. Other things the city has done is providing 30,000 free home energy audits, especially in low-income areas where people have high energy burdens, where they're paying too much of their household income on electricity and gas. Columbus is rolling out a residential PACE program that I mentioned. They've also recently passed a building transparency ordinance. So they are requiring owners of buildings more than 25,000 square feet to disclose how much energy they're using so they can start accurately counting carbon emissions. This got some opposition from apartment owners, but mostly went through. And finally, the bit.ly/addup-RF100 Columbus. That is our Ready for 100 petition to the City of Columbus to commit to 100% renewable energy, and we would love if you could sign that. So the big question is, do all of these programs work? And there's out of the 165 cities that have committed to 100% renewable energy, the first one, as you might guess, is San Francisco. They did that back in 2011. So most cities have made this commitment since 2018. So San Francisco makes a good case study to measure, do these programs work? And this is very transparent right on their San Francisco city website, and you can see their carbon emissions. And they've been going down, and a lot of this is because of buildings. You can see the building efficiency programs have really brought the building emissions down, but in transportation, they still have some work to do. Those emissions are coming down a little bit, but it looks like that's the next area for them to work on. And these are some of the sources for my presentation. Hope you found that helpful, and thanks so much.